Welcome to Horror Movies and Beyond, a show about reviewing horror movies for the living to understand the dead. And I'm your host, Ivotres Littles, and in today's video, we'll be talking about Ticks. Released direct-to-video in 1993 and directed by Tony Randall, who also directed Hellraiser 2 in 1988. So we're definitely in for a scary treat. It first opened up to a shed, and all you see is some kind of egg sack thing, and it's some stuff is being spilled on it, and you're not sure what's going on. And then it just leaves you there. And you're like, okay, what was that about? But later we meet Tyler, and definitely a very, 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 very young Seth Green. And we all know Seth Green from Robot Chicken, right? So to see him in this film is like, wow, that's a big jump. But we see a very young Seth Green, Tyler. And he gets dropped off by his dad and was like, good luck, son, and figure it out. So we're trying to figure out why does he get, dropped off here, and then he's like having a dizzy spell or what, who knows what his condition is. We're not too sure what it is, but he's just like, he's like, what is this? I mean, we would all feel that same way if we got dropped off in the middle of nowhere and your parents was like, see ya. So we meet Alfonso. We meet Panic. And Panic is like this tough guy with a dog and his basketball, like trying to be all toughy and mean to him and stuff like that. And it turns out that even though Tyler was having his, dizzy spells and stuff, he still held his ground right then and there and actually showed him off a little bit in the basketball. So after Panic, try to show up Tyler, and it ends up Tyler stood his ground, a van pulls up. So these group of people are in this van and they're picking him up. Jarvis, who's played by Clint Howard, known for his, strange and unusual characters. And if you remember Ice Cream Man, that was definitely a strange and unusual character. Then it cuts back to that egg we saw earlier. So the egg sac actually got bigger the second time around. So obviously this is not good for him or anything else in there. So Panic sees his dog and wondering what's going on and what is that on his dog. So Tyler was like, oh, let me check it out. Let me show you. Let me check out something. So they take the tick off. Tyler decides to put it inside kind of a napkin or whatever, and it just burns completely up. It's like, whoosh, it's just like that. So the van is driving through the wooded area to some kind of destination that they're going to. And obviously they needed to stop and get some snacks. So when everyone gets out of the van to go get snacks and stuff like that, Tyler and Panic just stays in the van. But Panic had another, idea on his mind. He was like, this is a great opportunity to start stealing some stuff. And one thing he finds in Rome's backpack is some kind of drugs or steroids or something like that. So yeah, he hit the jackpot. But Tyler's like, oh man, that's kind of, it's kind of messed up. But hey, you got to do what you got to do. So inside the store, they meet Jerry, kind of sneaks up behind, near Melissa and like freaks her out. And she's like, ooh, she's like, get out of here. And then we cut back to Jarvis in his shed of horrors, right? So he's fiddling around with some kind of trap, and then all of a sudden you hear something horrible, and he goes and checks it out. There he looks in, and the rat inside is just demolished. He's like, dude, you're all messed up. And as he's standing there holding that rat, something crawled across his feet. He's like, whoa, It's like, what was that? But we barely got a glimpse of what it was. And before you know it, he didn't even pay attention. And wow, there it goes. That bear trap then got his foot, and he fell down and just screaming. Poor dude, I felt so bad for him. And as he looked up, he just sees these egg sacs that are like on top of his shed, and then it's like he just lay there like he's like ah, and it's just like splat. But we don't even see what happened. We just know it just went on him, and we just hope he's okay, right? We just hope he is okay. So finally they get to the camp, and let me tell you, it looks like Camp Crystal Lake from another dimension, right? So as they're getting out this van, and you know, they're trying to settle in this cabin, and inside the cabin is like dirty and nasty, and then, you know, they open one of the closets, and there's some kind of egg sac creature that is just pulsating right there on the wall. And you know what kids do, they like to poke at things. So Tyler decides, oh well, let me go, you know, see what this is. He gets in hanger and just like pokes at it, and he opens it up, and then another little tiny thing just kind of looked like a tiny egg or something just splats to the ground. And Panic was like, oh, I got this. And he was like, bah! And then it's just like, yeah, just like he was twisting and shouting on top of me, and that sack was gone. Tyler was like, you know, I'm out of here. I'm done with this. As he's taking a walk, we could see some of these eggs on the signs and on trees and things like that. And I'm sitting there like, nobody sees this? Melissa decides to join him. So they're like sitting out there talking and whatnot. And, you know, she's like, oh, my dad this and Holly that. And, you know, like teens do, they complain about their parents. So as she was about to get up and leave, you see the reaction of Tyler's face. He's like, you got something on your back. She's like, oh, stop playing. You know, you just trying. He was like, no, there's something on your back. Don't move. So he grabs a stick or something, and he starts poking at it, try to, you know, get it off. And then it's like stuck. And she's like, you're hurting me. He's like, okay, just don't move. I'm trying. And the thing grabbed the tick creature grabbed the stick. It falls down and takes the hell off with the stick. I mean, just runs away, and they're both like, oh my goodness, what is going on? They run back, and they're like, Dad, I swear, we got to get out of here. There's ticks trying to get us. And then they're like, oh, you guys need to stop playing around and everything. And then I like what Tyler said, and where he's like, oh, here we go. Parents never believe the kids. And this is one time the parents definitely should believe the kids. Everybody's sitting outside. Here comes Jerry and Sir. And Jerry still is dirty. And you just can't understand, like, dude, get in the shower. And then they're telling them, oh, about the crazy folks and stuff around here and stuff like that. Just mind your own business. But no, we're not the strange ones. They are. Then we see Jarvis on the ground in that shed, and he wakes up. He's starting to feel something. He's like, oh, you know, like, what is going on? And he rips it to see what it is, and it's underneath his skin. It's like, oh. He just gun blaze on himself. He didn't try to get a knife to cut it out. He didn't try to pull it out. No, I'm finna do guns blazing, and he was just shooting on himself, like, just shooting on himself. And I was just like, wow, I guess if something is crawling under your skin and you have no idea what it'd be, I bet I probably shoot myself too. You have Holly and Charles, and they're like, ooh, the kids are outside, you know, what we're gonna do. And, you know, let's do adult things. Why the kids outside making a bonfire, but hey, let's use gasoline, right? And whoosh. I mean, you just see this fireball go into the room. They run outside. Are you kids crazy? You're gonna burn down the entire forest. And they're like, well, cut us a slack. We don't have any idea how to do a bonfire. You know, Panic's dog decided, go check out this shed. Man, that shed is, I don't know, it's the Shed of Horrors. Let me tell you, hey, that should be a movie, Shed of Horrors. Anyway, so the dog is in there investigating, and something is creeping and crawling in the on the ground, and the dog looks here, the dog looks there, and meanwhile Panic is like, my dog is tough. Brutus' dog that we see in the shed is like, I'm scared. And then all of a sudden something is just like run and jump on him. He's like, "Arr!" And that's all we know. And we all know at this point that something got Brutus. Panic is like walking back with his dog, and you know, the dog didn't know who he was, and he was, you know, going through stuff, and he was like so hurt and everything. He's so angry, so he decides to leave. He's like, you know what, Brutus is dead, there's no point in staying here. And as he's leaving, you see more ticks on the trees and things like that. It's like, oh my goodness, and still everybody is still like nobody sees these ticks. Nobody sees him, but he just goes and walks out there. Holly was like, hey, you need to go and get Panic. And Tyler was like, oh, okay. And he was like, oh, Panic has left. And Holly was like, what? What? So Charles decided to, hey, how about I'll just take the dog to the vet to see what happened to it. And the dog is laid out, and the vet is like examining the poor dog. And she's like, man, what is this? So she gets a syringe and she sticks it in there. Finally, she's like wrestling with it, and you see it like moving around and everything. And finally, she grabs a hold of it and pulls it out. And oh my God, it's this giant tick. Seriously, if I saw a tick that big, I would get out of there. I wouldn't care. The dog is dead at this point. My life is more important right now. How in the world can you snatch out something that big and just like, you know, no one runs? At this point, I would run the hell out of it. It just leaps out and takes off, right? It just takes off. It takes off and is running around with this syringe in it. And it's very smart. It's very cunning, let me tell you. Because as they were walking by, you see it like looking, like, you know, let me be... I gotta be careful, I don't want to get caught. I didn't know ticks were that smart. They're like walking around, it's like they gotta block off everything, make sure it does not get away. But yeah, that tick is like, let me find my escape route here, because they're on to me. And then it was like, just screw this. And so you see it run up the wall, and all of a sudden it just leaps out onto one of them, and finally they knock it down and squat. The vet is like squatting. You see the intestines and guts just come right on out. She's like, squish. Now Panic has already ran away for a while, and he is walking through the woods, and he's like out of here. But man, he's like walking. He's like, oh, what is this? What is this? So he like realized something is in his leg, and he's like, you know, screaming, hollering of pain, and he like rips his pants, and he sees something going, you know, see this giant tick, and he's like screaming, and so he finally snatches it off. He's like, oh, some relief. But then, you know, part of the tick, the head, of course, it starts crawling up, maneuvering itself up his leg, and he's like screaming anymore, and then he just screams, and it just screaming, and it cuts off. It's like, man, Panic is going through it right now. So Holly decides to see, you know, what the kids need to get out. The kids need to get fresh air. They need to have activities instead of just laying around. So Holly decides to ask Melissa, do they want to go fishing? So they go out there and start fishing and things like that. And, you know, the fishing line gets stuck. Hey, you need to go out there. And it's like, I'm not going out there. She's like, just go out there, get in the lake and get whatever it is, you know, get the net and get it, you know. Melissa's like, fine, I'll go. So finally she goes, and then she's like pulling up, and a dead body comes up, and oh my God, it's a sheriff, and they're like freaking out, running out of the water. So they run to the side and realize it's a sheriff car. So it's like, oh my goodness, they were about to, you know, scream and stuff like that. And it's like, no, be quiet. So they ran back. So meanwhile, Diddy and, you know, Rome are out there roaming around. You know, he's chasing after her. She runs away from him and finds the shed. I'm telling you, that shed alone is like, we're back at it again. So she's like looking around in that shed and just like, what is this? It's like, dark and it's musty in there. It's like, what is this? So as she's walking, she walks to a wall, and you see hundreds, maybe more, of little pulsating eggs, just like, she's like, no, I'm gonna check it out. I'm gonna see what it is. So she gets closer and closer and closer and closer, runs into Jarvis. Poor guy, he's like trying to come at her and stuff like that. He's like, help me, and he's just like, things like pulsating on his skin and stuff like that. She's like, oh my goodness, and she like falls, and then he falls on her. He's like, help me, shoot me, I'm infested. She's like, oh my god, and then it bursts out his face and jumps on her neck. She runs out of there with this thing on her neck. Panic is like laid out in the grass, and he's waking up, and he realizes that he's being, beat on by Jerry and Sir, and they're trying to accuse him of trying to steal their weed supply, and he like fights them and everything. He finally just like stabs Jerry, and he runs away. Jerry finally catches up to Panic, and they're like fighting each other, and Panic is just wailing on Jerry. You're like, yes, he's winning. And then you see Sir, and he's like, oh my goodness, and he takes off running, and Sir shoots him with the shotgun, and he goes down, and now he has this like bullet wound on his side. So meanwhile, this fire is going on, and then you see these ticks, just like running. They're hauling ass out of there. They're like, they're running for their lives. They have this fire going on around them. They don't know what to do. Dee Dee's over there having some issues. They're like, okay, we got to get out of here. But they're like, how can we get out with these things running around like all over? You can hear them trying to get in and everything. And then you hear someone begging for help. And they're like, don't let him in. They're like, do let him in. And, it's Jerry outside. It's Sir outside trying to find some shelter from all these crazy little ticks. That Charles decides to open the door. They come running in, and they have ticks on them. And Jerry got like one here, then he got two. It's just like crazy, and they're tossing him and stepping on him. And then we see Panic out there running, trying to get away from these ticks, trying to get away from the fire. And remember, he was shot, and he's like calling for Holly at the same time. Finally, he makes it to the cabin. Then Sir is like, don't open it. And they're just like, what? And so they open the cabin, and they see Panic. He like laid out, he got ticks on him. And of course, Tyler, went off of him. And, he's just sitting there suffering. And he's trying to tell them, and finally he's like, hey, they did it. And they're just like, and then Sir and Jerry are kind of like, that shifty thing. Like, what? He's like, hey, they did it. So then that's when they all look up at him. So Sir wants Holly to go out there and get the van. And she's like, So finally, Sir throws the keys to Jerry. He says, Jerry, you're going to go get the van. And he was like, not me. He was like, well, I can shoot you. That seems to be, Sir's kind of thing, is shooting people, it looks like, to get his way. So instead of being shot, Jerry decides, well, okay, fine. I'll go outside, get the van. So he goes outside trying to fend off these nasty ticks. He gets in the van. A tick comes up behind him and bites him in his neck, and he like passes out for a few seconds or a few minutes or whatever it may be. He wakes up. He sees the sheriff, that they possibly have killed and put in the lake, that the two girls probably, saw, or some other sheriff they might have killed. And he's like pointing a gun. He's like, oh no, and he like starts up the van, and he like takes off in there, and he like takes and crashes into the cabin. Now all these ticks decides to just like come in here from all sides. Dee Dee's like standing here, and all of a sudden you see like this tick thing in her hair. She's like, ah! And they get it and try to throw it, and all of a sudden you see Panic, and he starts to moving in the background, like moving and moving. His arms start frailing and everywhere, and he's like sliding over there, sliding over that. They're like, oh my god, what the hell is going on? And parts of him, like like bits and pieces of them started to look like tick pieces. And all of a sudden, the tick burst out of panic. And it's like, oh my goodness. And it just starts attacking Sir. And great, it's coming out of everywhere. They're like, oh crap, let's get out of here. So everyone starts running up the stairs. I mean, in this situation, I think it's probably the safest place. For the first time in the film, running up the stairs is where it's at. They come up with this great plan of Tyler swinging, you know, like George of the Jungle. But of course, Rome is last. And oh my God, you have this giant tick that's like coming at him. And I'm trying to figure out how the tick went up the stairs. I didn't know they were able to do that. But he's like fighting it off. And then, you know, if you remember what Tyler said, hey, if you burn them, they burst. So he was like, he ran back up there to save Rome. He burns up the tick. It burst. And let me tell you, it turned into a Michael Bay film. Blowing up everywhere. It turned into an action flick just like that. Let me tell you, but at least they got out of there, right? They survived the tick attack that you can never believe. You know, they leave the van. They drop that van off because, you know, obviously they don't need it. It's like showing you underneath the van, and all of a sudden an egg sac drop, and you just like, you thought you left the ticks in the countryside in the woods, but no one always got to straggle along. Said, nope. You thought you got away, but I'll show you. And it drops down. And that is my review. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on this review. Thank you so much for watching. What is that? Not sure what that is.